Okay, welcome, Hotep. All right, it's really good to see you here today, and we want to welcome all of you who are here. We know they're celebrating in this city and throughout this nation a holiday that's called Juneteenth. And Juneteenth is, in some ways, a very respectable day. I always tell people, however, that we have to remember that when we talk about history and African history, we have to ask the question, what did we do? Because the question about history and about all narratives is, what did you do? I remember once being in New Orleans, and I asked a group of school teachers in New Orleans to tell me, because I was getting ready to write a book on African American history. And I wanted to ask them, what were the 10 most important things in African American history? And it was very interesting to me because when they finished their list of what were the most important things in African American history, I said to them, at least half of the things that you have mentioned, we had nothing to do with. In other words, there were things that were done to us, or they were done for us. But what did we do? And that's a very important question for agency. And it's an important question when you start thinking about the history of a people. So someone says the Emancipation Proclamation. So, well, the Emancipation Proclamation was something that Abraham Lincoln did. But what did we do? And when you start thinking about the history of any people, you want to ask the question about what they did, not a question about what people did for them or what other people did to them, but what did they do? And so Juneteenth, in some respects, even as respectable as it is in many ways, because people have fought for it. And I remember living in Texas and having people celebrate Juneteenth. When you think about it, the general who went to Galveston, Texas, to announce that African people were free, did not go to black people. He didn't go down there to tell black people, y'all are free now. He told that to the white slave owners. And the slave owners, who many of them, who didn't want to accept the fact that the South had lost the war, they were reluctant. So the general said to them, look, Africans are free. And of course, once the slave owners relayed that message to the people who were on their farms and plantations, then, of course, we had what they call jubilation. We were joyous, and we were able then to recognize the incredible thing that had happened by virtue of the fact that the Civil War had been won. So I always like to tell people that actually the fact that when the Civil War ended in April of 1865, that probably would have been a better day to celebrate, because 186,000 black soldiers, men and women, fought in the Civil War for our own freedom. We fought for our freedom. And we gained our freedom through the courage and the bravery of the African men and women who fought. That, to me, is when we ought to celebrate. You see, what we did, what Harriet Tubman did when she saved 700 African people by herself from plantations in South Carolina. That is celebration. That's what we did. So it's a wonderful thing that people are celebrating Juneteenth. But I just want you to know that my perspective on it is that because a white general goes down to Galveston, Texas, and tells white planters that black people are free, that is not necessarily the only thing that I need to celebrate. But anyway, let's have fun with Juneteenth. Now, let me just say a few words before I introduce our outstanding speaker. I want to, first of all, say that it is a tragedy of moral and ethical judgment for the United States government to drop bombs on a country that has not dropped bombs on it. That there's no way in the world that you can say that you have not declared war on a nation that basically has not fought you. I mean, there's nothing that Iran has done to the United States. Not one thing. They haven't attacked anything that any American thing, and yet we drop some of the worst bombs that are in anybody's arsenal. We dropped them on Iran, and I have to declare, just as an African person who has lived in this country and who knows this place by virtue of the 246 years of enslavement that our people have gone through, and the 100 years of segregation, that I know this place and the deception, and not only the deception, but the attempt to distract us from the fact that there's a genocide going on in Gaza is something that, to me, is horrendous. And not only the genocide in Gaza, but the war in Sudan. The war in Sudan, which has killed more people possibly than the people who have been killed even in Gaza. And the war in Congo, which is the longest war that has gone on in the world. And that's a war over resources. It's a war over the future. That's what the Congo war is over. The Congo war is who will control the rare earth minerals that are necessary for technological advancement in the future. And certainly the Chinese are interested, but the Americans are interested, the British are interested, the French are interested, and they are stirring up a war in Congo. And that war is going on in the Eastern Congo right now. It's been going on for almost 20 years. And I just think that we are distracted because we don't know history and we don't follow news and we don't know what's going on. But one thing we have to know is that there is no reason for the United States government to be dropping bombs on Iran. That's, I mean, they say that they, it reminds me of what under Bush, what Colin Powell said. You remember when Colin Powell went before the United Nations and told them that the people in Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. And he was lying, but I don't think he knew he was lying. He had been given false information. But in this case, Trump was given proper information by his national intelligence director. She gave him proper information. She told him that, look, there is no evidence that they have a bomb that they're going to be making in a few weeks. That's what, and she is a Trumper. She's one of the biggest Trumpist people. And yet she told him that. He said, I disagree with you because Netanyahu says that they are getting ready to make a bomb. Not in my name. I'm just telling you that just for Malefi Asante, this war that Trump has instigated against the people of Iran cannot be in the name of African people, because we recognize the deception, we recognize the hostility, and we recognize the anti-immigrant attitude that Trump has stirred up in this country, given the fact that this is a nation of immigrants plus those of us who were forced into enslavement. And this land didn't belong to us anyway, didn't belong to the white people. This land belonged to the indigenous people. And those were the people whose land was invaded, and those people conquered and massacred and destroyed. And half of this nation, I have so many things. I'm not going to take up all of Dr. Dove's time, but I just want to tell you, half of this nation was Mexico. And so when the Mexicans are waving the flag in California, California was a part of Mexico. When they're waving the flag in Texas, Texas was a part of Mexico. Right. But the United States government took, in 1848, it took half of Mexico from Mexico. So this is a terrible time, and you need to know your history, because if you don't know your history, you will be lost, and you will not know the deception that can come from false cultural understandings. But brothers and sisters, I'm just happy to see y'all here, and I'm happy for those who are in the YouTube audience around the world. We are very happy that you come to the Matriarchy Asante Institute, and I just want to announce that this is our last public meeting for a while. We'll have another public meeting starting September the 7th, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to be visible. I intend to have several lectures in July and August that will actually be from the MKA Institute, but they will just be on specific topics, and it will be streamed on YouTube as well. So those of you who have not subscribed to our YouTube list, please do so at Matriarchy Asante Institute Lecture Series. You can do this whether you're in Paris or whether you're in Mobile, Alabama. It doesn't matter. We want you to subscribe, and we want you to tell your friends. So we're very, 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 very happy to announce that. September the 7th, I'm going to be talking, just put this in your book, because September the 2nd, I'm going to tell you what Zahi Hawass did not tell you about ancient Egypt. Because, and I'm going to tell you that because there is a whole series of lectures that are being given by Zahi Hawass from Egypt and other people going across the country, talking about Egypt, but not talking about Africa. So I'm gonna tell you in September, once they've done all their lectures, I'm going to tell you what they didn't tell you, and that's going to be hopefully a very wonderful presentation. I want to just thank you, all of you who have come to this session in person from Philadelphia, people we've had to come from all over the world who have visited here, and those people who are also on the live stream now. We, in a sense, as in the tradition, have saved the best for the last, and we have actually an outstanding speaker here today, Dr. Nah Dove, who, in my judgment, is one of the great thinkers and philosophers of the Africology field. She is an African womanist. She is a Diopian, that is, that she follows the work of Sheikh Anta Diop. She has her PhD from the State University of New York in Buffalo. She has taught in several universities, but she has written the great book called The Afrocentric School. She has written the book African Mothers, Bearers of Culture, Makers of Social Change. She has written, along with me, the book Being Human Being, Transforming the Race Discourse. She's now writing 2 or 3 additional books. She has many articles, particularly dealing with Sheikh Anta Diop, with Marxism, with African womanism. She is a professor that is beloved by her students at Temple University, where she is a professor. She has, in fact, I happen to see one of her students, Dr. Lateef Davis, here today, one of her students. So she is many outstanding students because of her brilliance and her calm manner. Dr. Dove has been recognized not just nationally, but internationally. The people in Brazil have recognized her and also initiated her. So we're just really pleased that she is here in our audience and is a member of our board. She's also worked with Lotus Academy. She's just person who just believes that she should devote her time to uplifting the African American and the African community worldwide. So I'm very pleased and very happy to have the opportunity, along with other members of the board and along with Dr. Jabali Day and Dr. Mr. Carlton and other people who are here representing this outstanding institution to bring to you my friend and my colleague. And I hope I have not moved her slides, but I think I have. I'm going to see if I can get her back to her original slide. Dr. Nah Dove. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, everybody. It's wonderful to see you. This is the family, and we practice all the values and beliefs of Africa in this sacred space. So I'm very honored to be able to speak to you and present my humble work. It really, it's just an understanding of the significance of culture, because actually many people don't know how important culture is, because most of us have been trained in the Pan-European Academy and we understand culture from the European perspective, which is that when white men in the race paradigm, which is part of the culture that is presented, were the most civilized people on earth, and that civilization begins actually when they have conquered the world, and the whole of the Pan-European Academy looks at it that way. So when we study it, the only way that we can make sense of our own humanity is to study it from Sheikh Anta Diop's perspective, because he looks at the African origin of civilization, and what he does is create a chronology. It is the chronology of humanity. And so I want to explain that he is, as he calls himself, the authentic anthropologist, because he understands culture through truth and history. So this is the angle that I'm taking. So the birthplace of humanity, which you've all read, is Africa, the mother of humanity. And I'm really going to focus quite a bit on the significance of motherhood. And it's the land of the first humans. That means that we all came out of Africa, and our ancestors are all African, and they're Black for everybody on this planet. It came out with the first culture, African matriarchy, the first speech, the first languages, the first civilizations, the first sciences, which we practice today, the first symbols, the first writing. I say symbols because symbols were happening thousands of years before something that we call writing, which we still can take back to Africa through the Medu Neter and the writing of Kemet. But thousands of years before that, people were still making symbols, which that's what writing is. And they were stating where they were, what was happening to them, and giving us a sort of historical moment in time as to what they were actually doing. So we can look at that history. I'm not going to deal with that history. I'm just going to suggest it, but Dr. Asante has a new word which is called messuite. And this word relates to the gap in our historical knowledge about the specificity of what was taking place before we look at early pre-Kemet and before we look at Kemet, because that has been the place that we understand who we were before conquest. And conquests were actually happening in Kemet. So Kemet is much older than the Egyptologists would like us to think. But there's been evidence from people who lived at that time, Manetho, for example, who adds at least 1,500 years to the early Kemet, which we don't deal with, because if we're Egyptologists, we use the 3,800 time BC to talk about who we are. And that is because the Egyptologists want to begin their own history inside the African history.
That's right.
So they don't want us to know anything about who we actually are. So we have the first writing, songs, music, dancing, societies, institutions, spiritual beliefs, and democratic ideals. So all this is hidden from us. So what has happened is that we know, scientists know, that we all came out of Africa. This is known. We're all taught this every day. And then we see pictures of us coming out of Africa as monkeys. And then as we come to the advance of humanity, we end up with a white man. I know you've all seen these pictures from when we went to school. So what they are proposing is that, yes, people came out of Africa, but the whiter they got, the more civilized they became. So because they're using the race paradigm to understand human ideas and behaviors, they have started the history of civilization during the conquest of the world. So the closer you come to being phenotypically white, then the further away you come from barbarism. And so the people that got left behind in Africa were the ones who were considered to be barbarous. Although through Africology, we have an understanding that all this is a falsehood, because the first inventions, the first ideas were African, and the first principles were African, the first ethical principles, which we don't use today. So the question in this is to be civilized or not to be. So this is how this is going to go. I think. Okay, Sheikh Diop and his two-cradle theory is absolutely critical to understanding the significance of culture and how it affects us. So here he is at his laboratory, and in Senegal, he is, I think I've got the list here. We know he's a multi-genius, those of us who know about him, because he's been debased and demonized in the Pan-European Academy. That's why we don't know him in sciences or anthropology or sociology or any of the disciplines in the Pan-European Academy, because they're all racist. And Sheikh Diop is the person who is able to show us the African origin of civilization. So he had very hard time even getting his doctorate, which he tried to get in Paris, eventually did. He has fought always for the integrity, character, and beauty of Africa to be reknown. This is why culture is so important. It's an educational thing, but our connection to Africa is through our cultural memory, and our memory can only be awakened if we have truth and knowledge. So it'll remain dormant, portals will close down if we don't have knowledge about who we were. But it's in our culture, and it just has to be awakened. So this is kind of the theory behind this. He used African cultural knowledge as an African born in Senegal to evaluate his studies and skills in linguistics, cultural and physical anthropology, history, chemistry, nuclear physics, and Egyptology. He created the two-cradle theory, which is that there is a southern cradle, which is Africa, the birthplace of humanity, the mother of humanity, and the most ancient cradle of civilization and culture. So all people left Africa, and over time, thousands of years later, the northern cradle developed. So he has these two cradles, and they are actually evidence of cultural orientation. And the northern cradle, their differences, let's say, relate to the positioning of the woman, which seems amazing, and that you could define two cultures in the whole human world. And the Pan-European Academy loves to say that Africa has thousands of cultures, because that way we cannot relate to each other because there are thousands of these cultures, but they're actually one of these two cultures, beginning with the first cradle. But there are many different representations of them. So they're not the same divinities, not the same practices, but we can see the similarities, which is what Joe looked at, and we can follow this. The similarity amongst the respect for elders, the respect for the ancestors, the love of children, the respect for the woman and the man as reciprocal relations. And so these are the types of things that Sheikh Anta Diop looked at to define what is culture, what is the cultural similarity among people. And in that way, he was able to say that there is a southern cradle of civilization and there is a northern cradle. So I know Dr. Asante has built this place with Anna. It's a sacred place with Anna Asante. She's the director of the Malefikati Asante Institute, but he is also the father of Afrocentricity, which is a meta theory that underpins the discipline of Africology. Now, Africology is actually the only non-racist discipline in the Pan-European Academy. So it has created a space for African ideas and African cultural beliefs where people have had a certain freedom to do the research to actually bring light to who African people actually are prior to the conquest and during the conquest and now. So this is a very vital discipline, and it is hated, of course, as is Dr. Asante by the Pan-European Academy, because it's about opening minds. And you can be a person who is not necessarily a Black person or a dark-skinned person, maybe a different phenotype, but if you are interested in the study of it, because these are the ancestors of all human beings, then you can study it and find out who you are in the chronology of human movement through time, because we begin with a particular culture, and we all have that same memory So it has to be reawakened if it's not there, through knowledge and truth, which everybody deserves. Some people are just ignorant because they don't know. If they had a choice, they may not be the people that they are today. And that is exploited to carry out the exploitation of the people who are running our minds. And the Pan-European Academy is a brain. It is a Eurocentric brain.
Yes.
And so when Dr. Asante, he says, we must center ourselves in our own historical cultural experiences, understanding the dislocation caused by colonization and enslavement. It's a prerequisite for building an Afrocentric bridge to the Pan-European shore. Pan-African shore, sorry. Yeah. When meeting Sheikh Anta Diop in Senegal, Dr. Asante asked of our wisdom keeper, our modern Jehuti, what can I do to defend Africa? And he replied, Africa needs no defense. We must advance, advance, advance. And he laid the groundwork for us to advance because it's the closest understanding of Africa that we have at this moment in time. So the Africology does the research to prove it. Okay, I've said the southern cradle. We're called Homo sapiens, all of us as modern humans. And we are 99.9% the same. This is very difficult to understand for many people because we use the race paradigm to actually analyze who we are, how human we are, how not human we are. And race is just a white supremacist belief. And unfortunately, we're all raised to believe in it. And so many of us who are victimized by this paradigm and the thoughts of this paradigm, the hierarchy of humanity, white, yellow, red, brown, black. Many of us victimized by it as academics teach it to our students, which really we're teaching a Eurocentric white supremacist belief in our own inferiority. And we may battle to say we're not inferior, but if you're in the race paradigm, how do you change your position? You know, it took hundreds of years, actually thousands, a few thousand years to create the race paradigm. And it took hundreds of millions of people to die in that creation. So to move one's position in that takes the same set of tools and beliefs to move from the bottom rung or the second rung or the third rung or wherever one is placed in that. And so it's all about killing, violence, but the secret is that the battle is for the mind. So because the mind is what manifests realities that we live. So it creates the culture and culture creates it. So anyway, we came out 350,000 years ago, roughly, and we began to leave Africa about 50 to 70,000 years ago. That's the Messuite, what is happening in there. The first Africans to leave Africa populated the world, and they became the First Nations people and our diaspora, despite phenotypical differences that took place over these thousands of years. People continued to practice African cultural values and beliefs. So they maintained the culture, but their phenotypes were different. So what we tend to look at with the race paradigm is these typical differences, but we never look at the culture. So there are some people who are missing in this culture, some people who in the Northern Cradle culture are not white, and some people in the Southern Cradle who are not black. So we have to be cognizant of significance of culture and its meaning to life, because it's within the race paradigm. So it's important to note that the Northern Cradle created the race paradigm. And the Southern Cradle produced civilization and culture. The foundation of any culture is based on the relationship between the female and the male, the woman and the man, who reproduce life and culture. Cannot have it without them. So the first culture, these are the mothers and fathers of humanity and culture. So the first people were Black and African, the mothers and fathers of everybody. This culture produced the divinity and ethical, moral substance of Ma'at, the Divine Mother. The Divine Mother lives with us all. We're all connected to one Divine Mother and represents those of any gender, phenotype, color, class, sexuality, who express their divinity in love, goodness, compassion that they hold for others. Mothering is an honorific title. The Northern Cradle was located in Europe, an Indo-Aryan part of the world. So we have been able to trace it to Indo-Aryan beliefs and values, but also must remember that this is race too. In harsh climates, food was sparse. The woman was more of a burden placed based on her needs as potential mothers, where men dominated women and societal structures like patriarchy and race arose. Actually, you can't have patriarchy without race, and I'll explain that. Here is a nice picture that I found of the mother, image of the mother. Every person on earth is related to one African mother, the mother of humanity. And this is the fundamental aspect of the Southern Cradle, which is African matriarchy, which means that the woman and the man are balanced, they're reciprocal, and they work together. So over time, during the harsh climates, when the woman became a burden, that was the beginning of this separation of the woman and the man, because she became hierarchicalized and lower than the man. So I'll just explain that. Here is Ma'at, who is the personification of the mothering ideal. Her presence and manifestation in institutional organizations, from family to governing, ensured the righteous existence of humanity as part of the cosmic order. In fact, she is the judge. The divine per-ah, which can be woman or man, depends who's conquering and who's got that position, humbly submits and respects to her feminine divinity. I just wanted to put this picture in because of this relationship that you really don't see carved in statues. It's usually a beautiful carving, but in stone. But usually it's a man, sadly, a European man. There are hardly any other people in the Northern Cradle area where we live and in Europe. No Black men and women of any substance. There are few, we can't take that away. But here, these people are 2,490 BCE. That's the level of the artwork, the level of reflecting this relationship, this balanced relationship. And so the skills, the beauty, the symbol are all in this picture. He is the son of the Per-ah who built the second pyramid. So some Africans left the southern cradle 70,000 years ago. And so I've mentioned about the phenotypical changes from climates, oceans, mountains, deserts, diets, forests, lakes, and so on, because this is what makes people different. And the sun, of course. So over time, these differences occurred, but some people kept the cultural belief alive. Patriarchy and culture and matriarchal culture stand in direct opposition to each other, even though it's the same people. These differences have a tremendous effect on the life chances of humans, and race and patriarchy are embodied in the Northern Cradle beliefs. I've mentioned these religions. I don't want to get into trouble about them, but these modern religions, like the Brahmin religion, the Hebraic, the Christian, and the Islamic, reflect the construction of patriarchy and race. So if you go into the stories of the debasement and demonization of the first woman, the creator, that is a Black woman who has committed a crime to go off with the devil, who is Black, and disobey her husband. So she is made biologically inferior as a punishment for her sin. And then you have, and when I say biologically inferior, the punishment is that women will always have trouble during menses, and they will have a hard time giving birth. It will be painful and difficult. So this is conceived by these people to be a punishment. And then the punishment of the Black man, Ham, for castrating his father, which is very interesting because Black men castration has been very popular amongst the Indo-Aryan Arabic people as well as the European white people in this country, not the Arab people in Africa and so on, but the white people in this country, using the race paradigm to define these people. It was a great, what can I say? It's like hunting animals and putting their heads onto the walls, trophies. So to castrate a Black man was a trophy. So it's interesting that the father of Black men is punished because he castrated his father. And his punishment is being Black as one of the number of punishments that he received. So that what you can understand is that religions can reflect the cultural orientation of the people that created them. And we're taught, religion is, it gives you understanding, it gives you truth and everything. For a Black person can never believe that. It can't be true. It's rubbish. Of course it is. And you can only know if you go to the teachings before these religious ideals, because they've been written and there's none of that in there. And these modern religions have reflected their cultural orientation and taken from genuine goodness impacted by arts. They have taken from that and they've written a whole bunch of rubbish around it. So what happens is that people read these things, read these holy books, and they see the jewels of truth in them because that's where they come from. But all the other stuff they may ignore, even though these religions have been guilty of killing millions of Black people. And it's as if that doesn't matter when you follow a religion. It must matter, because if the cultural orientation hates your humanity, then it's not yours, So So culture itself is transmitted through behaviors, beliefs, and values from our ancestors to our descendants. It's historical, psycho-spiritual, and linguistic. The evidence of culture's existence in the way that we think, behave, and produce material things, from architecture to art. So we create these things, they manifest from our minds, and our minds create the culture, and the culture creates our minds. So depending on our experiences, that will determine the type of culture that we invent and the type of buildings and institutions. And so all cultural groups invest in the development of their people. So I'm not making any, I'm just seeing culture as what it is. So that people, members, may survive and flourish individually and collectively. Critical to the collective is the moulding of the mind and intellect, and the mind central to the development of culture, which I've said, and culture to the development of the mind. So the mind is so important, even though in psychology it's not really understood to be as important as it is, because there's no spiritual stuff with it. I know Wade Nobles is one of the leading psychologists in understanding Kemetic ideas and making a link between Eurocentric training of psychology and linking it up with the African understanding of psychology, which in Kemet is the mind is connected to the heart and to the soul. So that's completely different from the psychology that we normally learn. The method of how mind and intellect evolve is vital in the development of cultural identity, because you can only know yourself if you understand the roots of your cultural orientation. And for us, and most people of the world, we've been conquered. And during the conquest, the cultural forms had to stop. That was very, very powerful, because what it does is erase the memory of culture. And that's how you can tell people they are something that they're not. Just like the Sudanese Islamic people are telling the Sudanese people, who were the Kush people, who were the early, even built Kemet, that they're not anything but enslaved to those people who are dying every day, and no one cares. And we have someone here who knows that we're lucky enough to have people who visit here who actually know that this is going on. And it's a very difficult thing to change that. It's the mind that can do it. The war can't, because they're equipped with everything to kill anybody who threatens control over the lands. Because it's all about taking the lands, and a religion that believes that you deserve to be enslaved and we deserve to take your lands. It's ours. You never knew how to do anything good with it, because there's no history of what has actually been done. So it's a reservoir of information based on experience. It's experiences that provide a foundation for understanding life and how it may be lived. That's how important culture is for us. All social institutions are culturally formed and shaped. We have to know this. Whatever culture we're living in, it determines the type of relationships we have, the type of family that we develop, type of healthcare that we use, the type of education, so-called, that we receive, the politics, the economics. Often people think that the capitalism is a way that can enhance human development, especially those who created it. But as you'll see, it came out of the Northern Cradle beliefs and values, and it has never been good for African people. We're all African, but the blackest African people are the ones who produce the wealth of capitalism to run the world and are still producing it, maybe in a slightly different form. The arts and spiritual systems. That's what all institutions are shaped, what culture does to shape these institutions. So you can go to hospital, and as a black person, a dark-skinned black person, there's more chance for problems to happen than there is for somebody called a white person. But it's also graded. So I'm acutely aware that I am a privileged person. And so this awareness has to be known, because we can't just say that we're just black. We can't do that, because we practice inside this thing that we use in the race paradigm. We practice the very similar types of beliefs. It's called colorism, but really it's racism, just practiced by us. And it doesn't beautify it that we're doing it, because it's being done to us. So if we do it, then we are practicing Northern Cradle values and beliefs. Respect, these are the differences. Respect for the man above the woman, the first hierarchy. Foundation of a belief in women's inferiority based on survival in harsher climes. I'm just going over what I said. The first hierarchy of humanity. Outcomes: injustice, aggression, greed, corruption, jealousy, lies, hypocrisy, murder, genocide, and chaos. This is the Northern Cradle outcome, because it has demonized the woman and it has demonized the man, the black woman and the black man. So this is, and it's not balanced in any way. So the view that comes from people who believe in other people's inferiority or lower on the scale, the view that comes from that is always tarnished, because it's looking to maintain it, because it's happy. People are happy in that. They live in that, and they can use people. So a person is judged essentially by melanin content of the skin in every social hierarchy, like gender, class, sexuality, age, etc. The blackest person is the most vulnerable to death across the world. This is a truism. In African matriarchy, I can't really read it without my glasses. So. And you already know it. Okay. Respect and love for the woman as mother, seeking harmony and reciprocity between mother and father. Mothering considered a high ideal. Gender is irrelevant if one is loving and compassionate and can be considered mother. Ancient spiritual systems exemplify the indivisibility of female and male, because as you'll see in the patriarchal one, male is creator. Non-hierarchical, egalitarian, democratic, just and balanced. These are the things about having a balanced view of the world. You can see things differently. You can see people differently. You don't have to hate people because they look different. You can love people based on what they do. That's the only way you'll be judged anyway. Ancestral respect and recognition. Race has no scientific evidence. The polygenesis belief is that there were several different parts of the world in which races arose. Now, although that has been proved to be crazy, because everyone knows everyone came out of Africa, the people who still believe in race still believe in this that has died and been proven a falsehood. Okay, this is African Matriarchy, the cultural foundation of Kemet, Kush, and Indus Valley civilization before patriarchal conquest. So you can see these symbols of civilization that were built in the cultural African matriarchy. They remain embedded in Africa and wherever African people live and remember who they are. But the thing is that we're all African, but it's true for all of us. Vestiges remain in deep culture and the unconscious to which we're all connected. The unconscious I'm not really talking about, but there is an unconscious in all humans where we are all connected if we can have the memory, the truth, and the knowledge to be connected with it. And there's several people. One of them is Mayers. I can't remember her name, but okay. I've said that about the Pan-European Academy. It begins with civilization when patriarchy and race rule. So that is a lie. There's no such thing as a race identity. It's designed to justify and maintain race. And it undermines the development of all supposed races. History, spirituality, language, psychology are the foundation of cultural identity. Just looking at Africa, the mother, you see all these countries that are being controlled through language. All the resources are being taken. This is broken down so that we have no connection with each other. This is what's being looked at. It's got nothing to do with people unless they can mine these things, and people just bring in other people sometimes to do that. But this is the true Africa as it has been constructed in terms of its materials. Zone of confluence is when these two cultures meet, and we're in a zone of confluence now, which is interesting because the First Nations people are the first Africans that left the continent, so they still retain African values and beliefs. They have been conquered to make a place for us, to build the lands that were stolen from them. Genocide was committed against them, and we begin history when the document of there is a document anyway, it's a rubbish document, but it says that Europeans, it says all men are equal, but they're not. And it has been signed, and that is the one Declaration of Independence that says this is the beginning of civilization. So all these people that came before are not civilized, they're barbarians. And then Africans were captured. So we've got two sets of people closer potentially to Southern cradle beliefs living in the same place. But who's in control is Northern cradle beliefs, as we can see with what's going on right now. Here in that missuite, here are the Khoisan people who created the Lebombo bone, which is like 43,000 years ago, which has put the movements of the sun, the moon, the planets in relation to women's menses, and we've just found the one bone. But this is science of people who were considered to be barbarian and know nothing. So here's just a picture of an early European. I'm not blaming him for anything, but his body has been found. And so zone of confluence, the Northern cradle always conquers the Southern cradle. So just coming to the end, this is what Sheikh Anta Diop said that we can use now, and what Dr. Asante always talks about in Africology, that when we know the models that we used to have that looked after people, that fed the people, that ran Africa and the world, and was generous and kind and loving to people, people try to say, oh, you're making it, I don't remember the word, but making it like a romantic thing, you know, but then you're killing people, murdering them, and using capitalism to build upon the blood of people, the lands that you take from people. That's what you think is beautiful and brave and heroic, you know. So we have to be careful about even the terms we use. But Sheikh Anta Diop said that bicameralism is one of the ways that we can bring the men and women together in a political and a governing setting. So that's, you can read it. Decolonizing the mind is what Africology is about. Our voices, those of us who've gotten in there, are actually changing the racism of the European Academy, because our voices are being heard and are challenging the way that we think, because every discipline is racist and patriarchal. So our study of our past gives us a lesson in government, thanks to the African matriarchal system. Our ancestors, prior to any foreign influence, had given women a choice place. They saw her not as a sex object, but as a mother. This has been true from the Egypt of the pharaohs until our time. Women participated in running public affairs with the framework of feminine assembly, sitting separately but having the same prerogatives as the male assembly. And so these religious things, as you can read, debased.
Yes.
The domination of the woman is perceived as the beginning of civilization, but actually it is civilization. Our choice is civilization or barbarism. The status of the mother is the measure of civilization. The culture that arises from this complementary relationship is the culture that represents true civilization. So we can actually get there, but it is a question of knowledge. It is an educational question. The mind is the battlefield. So I'll end up with some of the women here, the Amani Reynolds, who was a Kandaki of Kush, that is now Sudan, Kachika Anakoa, who was the Taino of Haiti, Queen Nzinga of Angola, Queen Nani of the Maroons of Jamaica, the Abba women, the Igbo of Nigeria, who fought against the colonists, Harriet Tubman, who is our person here, the Kandaki Asata Shakur, who is also our person here, who can't get back here, Kandaki Nkosi Kasi Nobandla Nomzamo Madikizile, who is, we know her as Winnie Mandela, and Professor Marcia Langton, who is a Yuman and Bija of Yuman and Bija heritage in Melbourne. So these are all women who are making a substantial change to the patriarchal aspect of what we deal with. Yes, you can name them. There were so many, I just picked these people, but you know, the list goes on, and the more that we understand that, then the more we can build upon it. So that's it, and would you help me with the final notes? There's just one final image to put into your mind, and then that's it.
Thank you for this brilliant lecture.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I know it was a bit long, I've probably gone way over the time, but thank you. Thank you.
It's not coming up.
Is it on the desktop?
Yeah, I think it's behind something, is it? Because it would be maybe behind that.
There it is.
Oh, great. Yes, just to end up with an image that is healthy. No, that's not it.
This is it, right?
Okay, it's, yeah, that's not the one, is it? But yeah, it's not the one.
This one?
No, it was on a link to you. Yeah, that isn't the one I sent, but that will do. I did the mother one. It's got eyes on it. And
It turned out.
In a realm beyond the confines of time and space, where the essence of the present unfolds in vibrant hues, I invite you to witness a world yearning for a surge of positive vision, boundless imagination, and a profound sense of interconnectedness. Here, existence is a tapestry woven from countless threads, each resonating in harmony, where the divine feminine emerges in all her glory, seeking to restore balance to the divine masculine's purpose. From the depths of this multidimensional expanse, she rises, a beacon of strength and resilience, accompanied by legions of golden angels, guardians of her sanctuary. She embodies the eternal force of creation.
Yeah, while we do Q&A, I can look for the other one as well. So one more time, clap it up.
So yes, all right, Doc.
I'd like to echo my brother's estimate and assessment of your lectures. It's outstanding. And my question is, what would you say the difference between Diop's theory and Leakey's theory?
And Leakey's.
Leakey. Mm-hmm.
Well, I know that he found, well, his assistant found the African bones. I think the major difference is culture. These were bones found to be the African origin, but there was nothing about the culture of what that meant. What did we do? What's happened? That Diop is showing that not only did that humanity come out of Africa, but there was a cultural development that placed the woman and the man as reciprocal, complementary, in partnership. And of course, that is what you had to happen, because how could we become the people of the earth if that wasn't the case? So that's the difference. There's no culture and specificity of culture. But thank you for asking.
Thank you very much, Brother Ramsey.
Hotep.
Hotep.
Yes, I became very vividly aware of something very disturbing when I studied and read the book Urugu by Marimba Ani, and came to an understanding that worse than enslaving us and taking the land and all of that, the worst thing that was successfully done to us worldwide was the successful colonization of God. Whereas you go, where we had a brother that have talked about how in the Sudan, blue black African that does not identify as he identifies as an Arab.
Yeah.
Okay. And then coupled with, you go to Ghana and you got everybody from dark brown to blue black, but you have people, all of these thousands of women bleaching their skin and whatever.
Yeah.
And she made me understand that the colonization, the successful colonization of God. So I said all that to say is, how, or is it possible that we can spiritually decolonize worldwide the African mind? Or is that doomed to be just a personal quest that a person has to go on? Because it is the worst thing that happened to us.
Okay, well, we can see evidence of this now. I arrived at that conclusion because of work that I did in the UK or my own experience. I lived in Africa for my formative years, and then I went to school in the UK, and there were very few Black people in the UK at that time. And what was interesting is that I was very familiar with European behaviors amongst families, especially amongst the poor, because when you impoverish people, you limit their ability to become conscious about anything, really. It's a very terrible thing. But what I noticed was that African people coming in, the young people had certain behaviors and practices that I knew when I was in Africa. And there were values that were being seen, behaviors that were actually the opposite of the behaviors of the Europeans. Like, let's say, children would respect their parents, whereas the Europeans at that time, and remember I'm 79 now, that, I'd see kids calling their parents terrible names, kicking them, and there was this sort of behavior that I'd never known as an African. But I noticed years later, I came away, I lived here and other places, and then I went back, and many people had come in from the Caribbean, African, Caribbean and African, and over time, in order to exist, they had taken on these values and beliefs of the Europeans there, and you couldn't tell any difference except by the color. And I think that what happened was that I understood the significance of culture and how you can be taught to be something that you're actually not because you don't know who you are. And so we have these behaviors now, and it's not the place to go into them, where we all have at the beginning of Africa, but we've come away from it, many of us, and some of us are striving to get back to those values and beliefs culturally. But many of us don't get that access to people who can teach that or know that. And so it's very difficult for young people who've been impoverished by the system to actually know who they are. Their, race has been and patriarchy have been very fundamental to these behaviors that we're seeing. And that's why they're cultural. the mind is the actual battlefield. So, but I do think everything's possible. I do think that we're heading back to those values and beliefs in the modern context. I believe that's happening. Otherwise, I'd get rid of myself quickly. Oh, this is the one.
Yep.
This is the final statement.
And the sound is up.
Oh.
The new era, where the sacred feminine will claim its rightful place as the foundation of creation. Our presence is not just a memory, but a prophecy, an awakening of the divine and eternal force of life. Through her, the balance is restored, the veil is lifted, and the power of the womb is shaped reality.
Okay, all right. Thank you. That's very powerful. I did have a question for Dr. Dove, and I'll just, Dr. Dove, I just wanted to, can you just comment a little bit on, the Mesuite was the period between the origin of Homo sapiens and the time that Europeans tell us that civilization starts, which is maybe 12,000 BC or 3,000 BC, whatever, when they say that the writing starts. But during that period of the Mesuite, I know I don't know whether you know or not specifically, but I want you to sort of muse with us about what happened to overthrow matriarchy. And we got patriarchy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's.
Well, I will go to use Diop's idea of it, which was mentioned slightly, but the different climes, the different environments, the difficulty of surviving, the lack of complementarity that occurred because of survival, and it happens now even in the desert. The desert people, they let you know that if you can't make it, you can't make it. Nothing's going to happen to help you do it. So it's
a physical.
It's the physical environment, but it's also a cultural one, because the loss in these environments, the loss of that ancestral relationship, the loss of being, having those mothering tendencies where you care for others is very difficult. And so the woman proved to be a burden, because she's always the potential mother as the girl, as the woman. And sometimes you can't wait for that. So the idea that's proposed is that there's a certain kind of relationship that occurred. But there are people also in the work who have been shown to be like that. And I don't know whether they're mad people, but they're all part of that.
Is there any possibility? Is there any possibility that with the values changing, we might get to matriarchy again?
Absolutely. Because you see, it's in the memory, it's in the cultural memory. They weren't always that. They come from that ancestral relationship to it. And it's a question of knowledge. I've seen people change. who understand things, and they're very upset and angry that they didn't have any choices. There were no information, and so they just went along a line of thinking. I've seen KKK people, National Front people in the UK, people who are almost beasts, who are looking at other people and thinking they're beasts because of their particular color, but they can change. I've seen it. I've seen, these. I've had evidence. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to just say that. Yeah. So everyone is linked to that very ancient culture, but we have no knowledge because it's purposeful. That's part of colonization. That you should never know who you are.
Right. Dr. Amado.
Yes, and thank you again, Dr. Dove.
Just 1 minute. We need to, for our audience in the YouTube.
Yeah, because we can't hear.
Thank you so much. Okay. And thank you again, Dr. Dove, who has a lot to do with my own academic rise and where I am. My question also goes towards the optimism, which I share, but also in the profundity of what you shared, something occurred to me about the Diopian analysis, which is, if we go back to the cradles as really being driven by the environment, right? The northern cradle is from this harsher climate, et cetera. Then, notwithstanding our shared optimism, as far as scaling the ability for people to change, if we go back to what Diop initially was talking about, which is the environment is driving this, can we strategize change without dealing with the current environment? Meaning, the fact that northern cradle folks have manufactured scarcity, the same kind of scarcity that created northern cradle, they created capitalism, manufactured scarcity. They created attacking the environment, climate change, manufactured scarcity, right? Can we drive real southern cradle emergence without dealing with these manufactured scarcity that in many ways parallel the original scarcity that created northern cradle?
I think
in other words, the scale change.
Yeah, I don't. Yes, it does. The thing is that Africa is still the place that holds much of this cultural orientation. Much of that African matriarchy is still there in Africa. So the thing is to build upon that, which is difficult. Dr. Asante has been changing things because now people are understanding that they need to know their own history, and they really have been bamboozled into using a history that is antithetical to their existence. And so really it will come out of Africa. That is my belief anyway, because the movement, the mother, the birthplace of humanity, has the strength, more of the strength there than anywhere else in the world. People like Mangalisa Subuku said that unless Africa is, that Africa is, if Africa is, it has the ability to help the world. And that's culturally as well as everything, every conceivable resource that can benefit society comes out of Africa. But knowing who we are means that we have to know the history of humanity.
That's right.
And that's what you're always doing in Africa. So it is a process, but it will come. There are some universities that are changing. Now we've got a global sort of relationship.
Thank you. Thank you. Bigger hand. Thank you very much. I understand. Thank you so much. It's so powerful and so correct. One last comment is that and thank you, Dr. Dove. The government of Salvador in Bahia has just made it possible for the court system, the judiciary system, to use in their court the symbol of what is called Oshe Shango. Oshe Shango is the double-bladed axe of Shango. That is the symbol for wisdom, justice, and balance. And they have now decided, this was just reported yesterday, that this is not even happening in Nigeria. This is in Brazil. In Brazil, the court just said, now this symbol, not just the scale of balance, but the symbol of the double axe, which is called Oshe. The Oshe Shango can be used as the symbol for their system of justice. And that's what Dr. Dove was talking about, that ultimately when we have African people asserting out of our own culture and out of our own history, we create all kinds of things that are positive and reaffirm our existence and reaffirm our lives. This has been wonderful, and appreciate all of you for coming, and appreciate everything here. And we look forward to seeing you again. But by all means, please stay tuned to the Maleficete Asante Institute lecture series on YouTube, and you will also see many things that we will be doing. And we'll see you again in September, and hopefully we're going to be able to get Dr. Almanor and Dr. Latif also on our schedule, and maybe Tugu on our schedule for the next coming year. So thank you so much. All right. Bye-bye. Let's do our last. We call upon our ancestors far and near, the mother of our mothers, the father of our fathers, to render mercy and to bear witness for all strength that we give to fight against the oppression of all people over the world. And may we, as people of African culture, always vow to be in the forefront of the struggle for freedom and justice. Ashe. Ashe. Thank you, Dr. Jabali.